Hello, everyone. Welcome to Celsius 233, your go-to place for fiction book summaries. Today, we will embark on a journey through the Borgias by Alexandre Dumas. The Borgias by Alexandre Dumas, first published in 1840, is a part of Dumas' celebrated crime series, where he explores notorious historical figures and events. This work delves into the infamous Italian Borgia family, known for their political ambition, corruption, and scandal in Renaissance Italy. Dumas takes an investigative and often dramatic look at figures like Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, and his children, Cesare and Lucrezia, whose actions forever changed the perception of the papacy and nobility. Plot summary. In the late 15th century, the bustling city of Rome is gripped by anticipation as the conclave convenes to elect a new pope. The Vatican, filled with influential and conniving cardinals, becomes the stage for a political tug-of-war. The powerful Rodrigo Borgia, a Spanish cardinal and master manipulator, is the man who has prepared most thoroughly for this day, having bought the allegiance of several key players. Rodrigo's ambition knows no bounds, and he has made the bold gamble to ensure his election by offering titles, riches, and even lands to those who would support him. With these bribes and promises, Rodrigo secures the papacy and assumes the name Alexander VI. But the conclave's decision fills Rome with murmurings of discontent, for many believe Rodrigo's notorious debauchery and thirst for power bode ill for the church. Upon his election, Alexander VI swiftly consolidates his power, building alliances with Italy's influential families and reinforcing his position against threats within and beyond the church. Yet his real focus lies with his family, particularly his children, Cesare, Juan, and Lucrezia Borgia, whose fates are entwined with his ambitious vision. Cesare, his eldest son, grows up under his father's guidance, displaying a talent for military strategy and a mind as cunning as Rodrigo's own. The Pope sees Cesare as his heir in both ambition and ruthlessness, despite Cesare's position as a cardinal. Meanwhile, Lucrezia, beautiful and perceptive, becomes a pawn in her father's hands, with her marriage arranged and rearranged to cement alliances as required. Juan, favored as the family's warrior prince, begins a campaign under Alexander's orders to conquer the Papal States. However, his impulsiveness and lack of skill quickly sow discord and leave him vulnerable to the region's complex political rivalries. As the Borgia name grows ever more powerful, rumors swirl around Rome, whispering of poisonings, betrayals, and illicit relationships. Alexander's enemies begin to accumulate, bitter rivals and jealous lords eager to see his family fall from grace. Cesare, hardened by his father's teachings and driven by ambition, begins to outshine his brother, Juan, whose failures reveal his inadequacies. Eventually, this rivalry ends in tragedy when Juan's body is found floating in the Tiber. Though the death is shrouded in mystery, many suspect Cesare's involvement, convinced that he saw Juan as a stumbling block to his own ambitions. In a grim twist of fate, Cesare steps out of the shadows as the dominant force within the family, shedding his cardinal robes and donning armor as he takes command of the family's military forces. With a new role to match his ambition, Cesare Borgia becomes Alexander's mightiest instrument, ruthless in his conquests and unyielding in his campaigns. His aspirations, however, extend beyond merely fulfilling his father's ambitions. He dreams of creating a kingdom of his own, consolidating power across Italy through war and strategy. He uses brutality and shrewd alliances to carve out territory, silencing opposition with swift and deadly force. To further solidify his position, he seizes upon an alliance with the French, gaining their support and wielding their influence to advance his objectives. At the height of his strength, Cesare seems unstoppable, an indomitable force driven by an ambition as vast as Alexander's vision for their family. Meanwhile, Lucrezia's position remains precarious. As a daughter of the Pope, her role is inherently political, and Alexander views her as a valuable asset to the family's ambitions. Her first husband is forced aside, and she is married off to secure political alliances. Yet Lucrezia is far more than a pawn. Beneath her beauty lies a mind as sharp and perceptive as her father's. Over time, she grows to understand the ruthless nature of her family and learns to navigate the treacherous world around her, where loyalty is a currency and betrayal can strike at any moment. When Alexander orders her to marry Alfonso of Aragon, he intends to reinforce his ties with the Neapolitan crown, but the alliance proves volatile. Cesare, harboring deep jealousy and distrust, quickly turns against Alfonso. In a series of violent encounters, Alfonso becomes a target of Cesare's wrath, ultimately meeting a violent and untimely end, an act many believe was orchestrated by Cesare himself. Within Rome, Alexander VI's papacy reflects his insatiable hunger for control, with power exerted at all costs. He reorganizes the city's political structure, placing loyalists in key positions and manipulating the noble families. Yet he cannot silence the growing unease. Cardinals, lords, and nobles watch the Borgias with a mixture of awe and dread, wary of the family's ascendancy. Alexander's strategy relies heavily on bribery and intimidation, and he uses these tools liberally. Through these machinations, he consolidates his power even as his enemies multiply in the shadows, plotting his downfall. Cesare's ambitions, however, stretch too far. Despite his military victories, the tide turns against him as his alliances begin to crumble and his enemies close in. His reliance on the French proves his undoing when their support falters, leaving him vulnerable to an increasingly hostile Italian nobility and the Holy Roman Empire. A series of crushing defeats follows, with Cesare's once loyal generals deserting him and the territories he fought so hard to conquer slipping from his grasp. Alexander, now in failing health, can do little to save his son from the cascading ruin. When the Pope dies, Cesare's power base crumbles, and his enemies seize the moment to strike. He is ultimately arrested and exiled, a fallen titan stripped of the power he once wielded with an iron fist. Lucrezia, who has endured her share of family betrayals and political schemes, eventually finds herself free from the Borgia web. She establishes her own influence in Ferrara, where she is married to Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara. Unlike her father and brother, Lucrezia's power stems not from conquest, but from her intelligence, charm, and resilience. She becomes a respected figure in her own right, distancing herself from her family's legacy and creating a life shaped by diplomacy and grace rather than ruthlessness. With Alexander's death, the Borgia legacy comes to a close, marking the end of one of history's most infamous families. The family that rose through manipulation and corruption finds its influence erased, its members scattered, its ambition unfulfilled. Cesare, once the terror of Italy, dies in obscurity, and Rome turns the page on an era marked by scandal, treachery, and a power so absolute that it ultimately consumed itself. Lucrezia, though forever linked to the Borgia name, manages to carve out a different path, a testament to her strength amid a family so defined by ambition and violence. In the end, the Borgias' story leaves behind a legacy of caution, a tale of power that, in reaching too far, ultimately collapses under the weight of its own ambition. That's it for now, but don't stop here. Alexandre Dumas has more stories waiting for you. Check them out in the description or on Celsius 233. Remember, while our summaries capture the essence, they can never replace the full experience of reading the book. If this summary intrigued you, consider diving into the complete story, buy the book, and immerse yourself in Alexandre Dumas' original work. Bye-bye, take care, have fun.